Are you ready to crack the code on closing bigger deals and landing better clients? Welcome to The Closing Code, the podcast for sales pros and agency owners who want to master the art of selling high-ticket digital marketing services. In each episode, your hosts, Clinton James and Josh Koenigsberg, bring you real-world strategies, actionable insights, and proven tactics to help you level up your sales game. No fluff, no gimmicks, just the tools you need to win more deals and build a thriving agency. Let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of The Closing Code. I am Clinton James with Water Restoration Marketing, and as always, I'm joined by my sidekick. No, I'm just kidding, Josh. You're not anyone's sidekick. Josh, introduce yourself to the people.
I'm the bench warmer, Josh Koenigsberg, law firm Marketing Pros, and I am just super excited about today's podcast. And as always, it's great to be side by side with my partner, Clinton James.
Oh, gosh.
Let
So
you do the intro.
this may get a little confusing for the audience because we don't usually have two Joshes on the podcast. But I'm going to do a little background here because the whole reason that I am connected to Josh K is because of the man that we're interviewing today, Josh Nelson. Josh is the founder of Plumbing and HVAC SEO. He and his wife Yesenia are the creators of Seven Figure Agency, which is where I met Josh Koenigsberg. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a podcast host, and in his spare time, he also coaches agencies on how to scale up. So, Josh Nelson, thank you for joining us today on the Closing Code podcast.
It's my pleasure. I'm pumped to be here. I've been listening to you guys' episodes. You guys are crushing it. And Clinton, you got a voice for this. It sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you. So, Josh, one of the reasons that I wanted to get you on this episode, on this podcast, is not only the network that you have created with Seven Figure Agency, but when I go through the training modules and all the content that you provide to agencies, a lot of it's geared specifically around sales, right? How to go out and get new clients for your business. So, I think we'll start, Josh. Let's go ahead and start with the interview. Go ahead and ask Josh some. Give the audience a little insight to how Josh Nelson, the man, the myth, the legend, got started.
Yeah. Well, once again, Josh, thanks so much for joining us today. We are so pumped to have you here. Just for the audience, for those of you who don't know you, how did you get your start in digital marketing? Because I love this whole story.
Yeah, I'll try not to make it too long so we get into the sales stuff. But started my first agency right out of high school called delegating. It was a web design hosting company. Beat my head against the wall for the better part of 4 years while I was working my way through college, trying to sell websites, trying to sell hosting. Really was not successful at all. Could have made more money working at Starbucks. Had to shut that business down. And it was because I had the wrong model. I didn't have a great sales process. I just wasn't going to be successful with the way I was operating. Went to corporate America, worked in B2B sales for a couple of years. Was a big passionate learner of, the student of the game, right? Reading Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all these books, and really decided I would give it another shot. This time I worked at Reach Local, the big pay-per-click management company, for about a year, just trying to get, what are they doing differently? How is it that they grew an agency to $500 million per year, and I couldn't even make $10K a month in my previous agency? And from what I learned there, I was like, okay, I think I've got this thing dialed in. Launched Plumbing and HVAC SEO, which went to 7 figures in the first 2 years, now does about $7 million per year.
Love that. So why did you focus? What led you to make the decision to focus on a niche, and that niche being plumbing and HVAC?
Yeah, I think basically when I was working in B2B sales, I just saw like the most successful salespeople, and the most success I had was when I was in a very specific market. And I was like, hey, you know what? Seems like if that works for me in document imaging sales, and then it worked for me in like payroll sales, wouldn't that same concept apply in digital marketing services? And as I had a generalist agency serving dentists and roofers and chiropractors, trying to reinvent the wheel from one client to the next, trying to convince that first client in any vertical that I knew what I was doing and I was worth my salt, to finally getting a couple of plumbing clients and being like, well, wait a minute. Once I've got one plumbing client and I've got good results, it just becomes so much easier to get the next client because they want to talk to a reference and they want to see what you've done. They want to see that you've got proven results. And then on the back end delivering, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every client. And so, it wasn't like a linear thing, but over the time, I was like, well, this would be so much easier if I just focus on this one vertical and became the very best here versus trying to serve everybody.
So there wasn't one specific turning point. It was just a gradual realization that, hey, we're really good at this niche. We're knocking it out of the park. I've got case studies I can share, which pretty much is the same thing that happened to us once when we decided that that's how we decided on our niche, which is law. So was there a first big client win that you can recall that really said, wow, this is amazing? Because you know our story and how that worked with us and those big clients, those big wins, man, they feel great. So,
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a big win. It was kind of our first plumbing client, coming out of full-time sales at a different company. I landed Town plumbing company in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Paid this on a check. It was $1,600 a month. And first client, we were actually thinking we were going to target restaurants at the time. We were like, oh, we're going to get this restaurant agency going, but we needed to pay some bills. So we got this client, Town Plumbing. And his payments is what helped fund everything that we did that grew into the agency that we had today. So even though it wasn't a $50,000 a month deal or a $10,000 a month deal, it was a massive win for us.
Could you imagine if Josh Nelson would have ended up in the same niche as Matt Platt? Wow, that like my mind is just blown at that thought. So, all right, so
can I put a bow around that, Clinton, for the audience?
absolutely.
$1,600 a month to 7 million a year. Absolutely amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's get into the part that I really like. Let's talk a little bit about sales process and kind of what yours has evolved to. So when exactly did you realize you needed to have a defined sales process in your agency?
Yeah. So again, my first agency was, just off the seat of my pants, trying to sell websites, trying to sell hosting. And then I worked at Reach Local for the better part of a year and a half. And they had a really well structured, well defined sales process. It was sales training. I had to go to 2 weeks of training boot camp. And it was like, here's how you make the calls. Here's how you have the conversation. Here's how you ask for the business. And so I kind of picked up a lot of how I approached the sales process from the training that I had there. And then just, really refined it as I wasn't just selling pay per click. I was selling a growth program and there were so many different things that went into the mix. But I recognized like really early when we started the agency, we need a systematic approach to get appointments, to get them warmed up, and then to have a great process to get them to say yes and agree to the monthly retainer fee.
Okay. So for our audience, can you walk them through what your current agency sales process looks like?
Yeah. So do you want me to start at sales call or some of the stuff that leads up to
No, let's actually talk a little higher level. Let's talk about lead generation, just slightly, right? I know you've got a bunch of marketing channels, a bunch of poles in the water, but let's say from the time someone responds to a meta ad that you're running for the
Mhm.
agency, what does that process look like for a prospect?
So pretty much all of our marketing, regardless if it's a Facebook ad or something inbound, is going to drop onto a pipeline in high level or whatever, CRM. We do it in high level. And an appointment setter gets an alert. And I'm a big believer in speed to lead. So the moment they get that inbound opportunity, they're trying to look that person up so they can see, is this a legitimate opportunity in our niche that's a good fit? And that appointment setter then moves it from opted in to qualified in our pipeline. And then there's an appointment center that's just focused on calling everybody that's in qualified, calling, sending DMs, trying to connect with them in some way or the other to get them onto the calendar for our sales team. And then once they're scheduled in, we do have an appointment funnel that warms them up, kind of precedes a little bit of thought work for them to do before the appointment to kind of open their brain to what's possible. And we still, to this day, we kind of pre-screen in advance, and then we do a structured sales conversation around where they are, what their goals are, what they've tried in the past, why they're trying to make a change right now, and then pivot to showing them what we can do, sharing examples, and ultimately asking for the business.
Do you traditionally do the kind of strategy session where you're finding out their goals or kind of some things that we do traditionally during a discovery call? Are you doing that and the sales presentation kind of on the same call?
We do. In our business, just we like that's the way we've done it for quite some time. I know there's a case to be made for discovery call, separate, presentation.
If it's not broken,
We do it on one call, right? And sometimes if it needs to be rescheduled to another, we'll do that as well. I will say the caveat to that is that they're not just scheduling in and like wasting time. They have to fill in a pre-appointment questionnaire. So we know if they're legit, if they're already investing in marketing, who they're working with today, and otherwise they can't even get to our calendar.
so that seems like a process that's evolved over time for you and your agency. It's been pretty consistent here recently. What are some of the mistakes that you made when you were trying to dial in that sales process initially?
Well, I mean, it used to be we would get people that could just schedule in, and then we would do all of our due diligence, right? We'd pull up their ranking report, we'll do the analytics on their website, we'll like spend a bunch of time and energy, and then we'll get that person on the conversation. And there was no chance. Like they were literally, they were gonna buy regardless of how good our due diligence was, regardless of how prepared we were. And so we spent a lot of time and energy wasted on prospects that would have never been a good fit.
Okay. So
And that kind of led to, well, how could we fix that? Right. And like two choices. One is do like a discovery call and like check in with them. Okay, is this legit? Or they seem like a good fit? Are they already investing in marketing? Do they have a problem we could solve? If the answer to that's yes, great. We'll do another meeting and we'll walk them through it. The other was to just have them fill in the answers to the question in advance. And we went with that as the approach that we follow.
So, question on that, because I've traditionally thought, okay, the more automations, the more due diligence that a prospect has to do to even show up for the sales call, the less likely they're likely to fall out of the process there. I guess you take the opinion of if they're not willing to invest the time to fill out that form, answer that questionnaire, probably not a good fit to work with you anyway.
Yeah, I think it depends upon your marketing, right? If you're very outbound focused, right, and you're sending cold emails and you're chasing prospects down, you don't want to create as little friction as possible, right, and get them on the call and convince them that you're a fit. If you've got more of an inbound marketing process where you've positioned yourself as an expert, you've put out great content in the form of webinars and podcasts and books. Ideally, they're exposed to your value in advance, and they're like, "Hey, look, I'm willing to jump through whatever hoops to potentially hire your services because I believe you could help me." There's a big power dynamic difference when someone comes to you pre-positioned to buy like that because they came through your content funnel and they had to fill in a multi-page form versus like they just showed up cold.
Quality versus quantity, right?
Yep.
Now you've got an entire sales team in your agency. What changes or things that you've done in terms of working with your sales staff to increase their close ratio and make sure they're bringing on higher ticket clients?
Yeah, so I will say I have a sales team at seven-figure agency. So there's appointment setters and sell by chat people and salespeople. At plumbing and HVAC SEO, it's an appointment setter, a marketing coordinator, and a closer, right? That does all the sales. So it's a sales team, but it's not like I've got this floor of sales guys. It's one high ticket conversion sales professional.
Awesome. Any tools or frameworks that you use to make sure that that salesperson is doing the same thing consistently and repeatedly?
Yeah. So going back to your previous question, how do you train that person up?
Mhm.
I think the most important thing you can do is role playing, actually like asking the questions and getting the answers and hearing how they move through the conversation. And then call recordings, like listening to those calls and giving actionable feedback. Hey, you could have said this differently. Hey, you set the improper expectation here. That's the only way people improve in their sales process. Uh, Frameworks, we've got a very simple framework that we use for our sales conversation, which is how we open the call, how we set the agenda, the questions we ask to create the gap between where they are and where they want to go. And then we've got a pretty step by step process that we do in terms of running analytics in advance, their rankings, issues with their website, how well they're converting the leads flow that they have, so that when we do pivot from, hey, you've got this problem, you've got this goal, here's why you're not there, we can actually back up with logic. Here's all the gaps in your strategy today. And here's what we're going to do on our end to help you hit the targets that you're after.
Makes perfect sense to me.
So what was the epiphany that made you realize that, hey, it's time to hire a sales rep? Because that's a question everybody who's growing their agency and growing it rapidly, like, when do I hire my first rep?
Mm.
I feel like you're staring at me, Josh, like I need to hire a sales rep.
I mean, I think for me, it was always I want to grow a business and not a job, right? And so, if you run the agency and you're still doing the website or you're still doing the SEO or you're still doing the content, obviously that's a job, right? And you need to remove yourself from that. And that same thing applies to the way that you market yourself, and same thing applies to having a salesperson. And so my big picture objective, and there was a while kind of in that $1 to $2 million mark where I couldn't imagine removing myself from the sales, right? Because that was my role. It was my core function within the business. If I don't do that, then I serve literally practically no purpose in the organization at that point. But I just recognized if I want to go to the next level and I want to have the freedom to do what I want to do and still see this business grow, I got to get off the Zoom sessions and put somebody in place to take that responsibility. And we had stumbles along the way. Like initially, I hired just an appointment setter just to chase down opportunities, and that really didn't work out. And then I had a salesperson that I put in place that was just commission only, but like just selling the dream. And while he sold really well, he started creating a lot of churn. Like he literally was selling deals that were never going to be a long term fit, and that created a little bit of a disaster. But finally got it dialed in, and for the better part of the last probably 7 years, I've had someone else taking care of sales calls so that the business grows and I don't personally have to be involved.
So you you define the roles, so you got a setter and a closer, and then you've got support in the marketing side, right?
Yep.
So you train how long was the training period? And I ask because I now I'm on my third sales rep because we all understand that we have problems. um, she's just now about 3.5 months in and closed her first deal today. So it took that long to get her there, right? So how about of course we're a little bit more complicated in what we offer, as you know, and it's higher ticket, so it's more, it's a little bit more difficult to close. So,
Yeah.
how long did it take you to get them dialed in? Where you, because I'm still not ready to step away from her entirely. She still has training. So,
Yeah. I think, it really depends upon the caliber of the person and kind of what their background is. I would think at a minimum, it's probably, you know, 30 to 60 days. And, for me, the training process, if I were taking somebody from another agency or somebody with a little bit of sales background, it would be listen to my sales conversations. Here's our framework and how I would want you to run those types of calls. And I would role play with them until I felt like, okay, they've got the role play, at least in theory. They're asking the right questions. They're hitting the right sales, points. They're listening in on my sales calls that I'm doing in the meantime. Um, and then eventually I would be listening in, like kind of like a joint call like this. Let's say Clinton was the prospect and Josh, you're the person that's the trainee. I would have you run, but I would be there to jump in as needed. In the scenarios that I've faced, placing this role, initially at plumbing and HVAC SEO, I let go of that process too early with the first sales guy. So I got him trained up. He did a couple calls with me. I was like, okay, he's got it. Right. And I was like on with my life. And that led to a lot. I didn't listen to the calls. I didn't role play. I had the account management team deal with the aftermath with the people that were coming in. On my next salesperson, we had the benefit of having somebody that was one of our top account managers that just wanted to transition into more of a sales oriented role. And so that was great because he understood the expectations. He understood the reality of what we could deliver. He wasn't just going to go out and overhype and oversell. So that's something everybody can replicate. But I think that process of here's the training, let's role play, let's sit on calls together, you do it, and I'll listen, and then eventually, they're just running with sales operations from there forward.
so that brings up an interesting point because there's two schools of thought on that. So the way you did it was you were able to recruit away from other agencies or within the organization to have the understanding, and then you just need to teach them how. So it makes me think back to the movie. One of my favorite movies is Miracle, about the story about the 1980 Olympic hockey team. When
Mm.
when they made the movie, the problem and the challenge with making a movie like that is you've got to get actors and you've got to teach them how to skate and play hockey. And what made that movie great is they actually got hockey players. It was easier to teach hockey players how to act, right? Makes perfect sense, which is why the movie turned out. So the way I've done it now is I've actually got someone from the legal industry who's a JD, and I'm teaching her how to sell.
Yeah,
So
it's great
that,
talent
that
position.
that- right, yeah, and she's got all these contacts within the industry, so that makes her point of entry and the deployment much faster because she could just reach out to her network of people. So, or so, a- what? How did you set up your initial KPIs and expectations when you first started? Because I know how I've done it, and Clinton, you've got a thought process on it. But Josh, go ahead.
It's been an evolving process. Like as I looked at the history at plumbing HVAC SEO, believe it or not, like it was an average of 5 or 6 clients per month. It wasn't much greater than that at an average of, $1,500 to $2,000 per month, very consistently year over year over year. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to put a salesperson in place, we should expect 5 clients at a minimum, right? So that's your bench, like your baseline benchmark, and the commission amount can kind of go up as you get to 7, 8, 9, 10 plus clients. The main KPIs were how many appointments did you actually run, and we were shooting for 25 per month. What's your close ratio? At least 25%. And now we're shooting for higher than that, but that was like new salesperson getting trained up. You need to close at least 25%. Otherwise, this definitely isn't working out. And if you're on quota, which means I think it was like you have to sell at least 7 clients per month. If you're on quota, just make sure you've got your 25 appointments, right? If you're off quota, I need you to be making 100 dials a day in addition to in addition to the minimum metrics. And that was just kind of how I approached it. But if you're on quota, you don't have to worry about that piece. Like
And clearly, it's worked, right?
yeah, it worked really well.
So, are there any lessons that you've learned in delegating and removing yourself from that role and delegating that might be beneficial to the audience?
I think the biggest thing is if you find the right person, they're not going to need to be babysat, right? And there are people, you have to babysit, and they don't tend to work out, at least in my experience. So, if you've got to tell them exactly what to say, exactly how to say it, you got to like make sure that they're making their calls and they're showing up on time. They're probably not going to be a good fit, anyways. But I'd say the second thing is there's a difference between delegation and abdication. And I think as entrepreneurs, as quick starts, we will all, lean naturally into abdication, which is I'm going to put a salesperson in place. It's their job. And now I'm not even going to check in with them again. I'm not going to ask how they're doing. I'm not going to give them any coaching feedback. And that's a problem, right? That's a big problem because sales it's not like a solo sport. And usually you're going to get, frustrated. You're going to get disengaged. And so those salespeople, they need targets. They need a scoreboard that they're checking against. They need someone that's encouraging them when they get into a little bit of a slump. They need that feedback. And so you got to put some type of meeting rhythm in place, even if it's just a one-person sales team. That way they're keeping encouraged and they can get out of those lulls that we all find ourselves in sometimes.
So I'm absolutely shocked to hear that you only have a single salesperson at Plumbing and HVAC SEO. My assumption, an agency that's doing $7 million a year in revenue, it probably has a whole sales team, right?
Mhm.
Um, can you? So just so I have a clear understanding of what your sales organization looks like right now.
Yep.
So you have a setter, you have a closer, and then you've got a marketing assistant that assists those guys, probably with campaign development or something like that.
Yeah.
Who
No,
who
that's
is your
exactly right.
who is your salesperson report into?
Salesperson reports to me. So on the accountability chart, he would report to me. We have a weekly sales and marketing meeting where the whole sales team comes together, and then we go into our leadership level 10.
Okay. Um, we constantly run across these vendors, Cole Gordon, some of these other guys that have these external outsourced reps that you can that you can hire. And I've heard mixed bag about a lot of them. Can you tell the audience a little about your experience with internal people versus outsourcing that role?
I think that's a really tough role to have in a third party, right? That's got to be somebody I think on your team that's fully dedicated, that understands your organization, understands the promises. Um, there's two issues I've seen with those subcontracted things, and I'm only speaking from my own experience. And if you have a different opinion, that's totally fine. The first problem typically is they're going to want to get a percentage of recurring revenue into perpetuity. At least when I talked with a couple of those organizations, that was what they wanted. I was like, that would bankrupt my organization. Like, there's no way I can give you 20% of recurring revenue just because you put a salesperson on my account, right? That's one thing. The second thing is, they're going to be hardcore closers, which is great. Like we need people that can close deals and get the yes, but at what cost, right? Do they care about the fit for the organization? Do they care about the expectations that are set? Do they care about the account management team that's on the other side that's going to have to deal with that client? Do they care whether that client is actually going to stick around and be good retention? Because retention in my line starts with the way they're sold, with the expectations that are set. And I think one of the reasons we're able to maintain like a 97 to 98% average retention rate is because it starts in sales. And so I would caution against just saying, hey, like I'm gonna hire a third party sales organization that's just magically gonna fill my agency with clients.
Okay. Um, I guess, are there any with the salesperson that you have in place right now, is there any specific scripting that you just require them to follow verbatim, or have they been with the organization long enough to where you just give them more of an outline of what needs to be covered during sales calls?
I don't think that a verbatim sales script works. I think a framework is much better. And there's certain high points that we definitely want to make sure that they cover and that they're sticking with the flow. But at this point, our sales guy's been with us for so long, he's able to innovate and pivot and make adjustments based on his knowledge and his expertise in the industry.
When they start, was there a little bit more, "Hey, let's make sure that we keep you on the specific framework or scripting that we've developed because we know this system works."
Absolutely. At the beginning, I would say at least the first 30 sales calls, at least the first 10 or so clients sold, they should be following, okay, here's how you open the call, here's the questions you ask, here's how we pivot to showing our solution, here's what we ask at the end to convert the opportunity. Yeah, early on, they should be following the script. And when they're hitting their KPIs and they're like above quota, then say, okay, now feel free. Like it's just going to cost you if you make a change that doesn't lead to a sale. So you can innovate this process within the framework.
How often are you reviewing your current salesperson's KPIs, going through and doing a pipeline review, or even listening to phone calls and providing some
Mm.
coaching and feedback?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I meet with him every single week. So we're looking at those KPIs, on track, off track. Are we, going to hit our targets? I probably listen to a sales conversation once a quarter just to see spot check. It should probably be more frequent, but that's the reality.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about seven figure agency when we come back. But before that, let's go ahead and throw it to a word from our sponsors.
Running an agency is demanding, and as you know, the process of interviewing, hiring, and training new team members is both time consuming and costly. It can even hold back your agency's growth. We have found a game changing solution in a company called Vertrify. Just like cracking the code to closing deals, finding the right talent is essential to your success. Vertrify partners with digital marketing agency owners to help them scale faster by providing bilingual appointment centers and salespeople from Latin America. As an agency owner, your time is best spent growing the business, not getting stuck in the process of hiring and training. Vertrify's staffing solution frees you up from those time-consuming tasks so you can focus on scaling. Ready to delegate and grow? Visit vertrify.com/closing code to find pre-trained salespeople who are experts in the closing code way. Let's build your high-performance sales team together. Okay, we're back again with Josh Nelson from Plumber SEO and Seven Figure Agency, and super excited. The conversation's been tremendous thus far. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Seven Figure Agency because I have been astounded and honored to be part of the journey. I think when we joined, it was about 5.5 years ago. And I think you were at about 30 members maybe, and now you're over 350, I believe. So that's more than 10x growth. And again, congratulations. It's been tremendous to be part of the journey. Thanks for inviting me to the party. And so,
Oh, thank you for everything you do to support the community on the sales coaching, and Clinton as well. You guys are, not only members but massive contributors to the program.
it's a pleasure. So what led you to start Seven Figure Agency? Here you are at Plumber SEO, you're growing, you're doing a couple million a year. And you know what? I'm going to start coaching and come up with this coaching model.
Yeah. I think it started with me being a big fan of Dan Kennedy, old school direct response, like dating myself. I know Josh is a big fan, probably Clinton is a big fan, but he always like his big thing was you've got your business, and then a byproduct of that business, if you're successful, is some type of informational product, right? Some kind of information training. And so our agency had grown to seven figures. I was in all of the agency specific local SEO groups and training organizations. And I just kept seeing all these agencies that were around, $5,000, $10,000 a month and never getting anywhere. And they started asking, like, what's going on with your thing? How come it went to seven figures? Like, what are you doing differently? And I just, based on me thinking, all right, this has got to be the end product anyways, that I'm going to create some type of information training for the agency based on what I've experienced. And then I started getting those questions. I said, all right, let's create the seven figure agency blueprint, which is how it started. It was a product. It was a program that people could buy. And, guys like Alan Hillsberg and Danny Barrera and Brian Stearman bought that product, and it wound up helping them. And they went to, now they've gone to seven figures, but it was like a 3-year time frame between when they signed up and when they got to the $1 million level. And I just realized, what, a product in and of itself is too slow. People need more feedback. They need more hands-on support. And so we turned it into, it's blossomed to what it is today, where there's live events 3 times per year. There's coaching support. There's ongoing training. And so that was the original thing, was there was people that needed it. And I felt like this was a good opportunity for me and for them.
So the program supports agency owners, and so I know the model obviously as a member. Clinton knows the model, but let's talk about the events and what if someone were to join, what would they get?
Yeah. So they're going to get, first and foremost, our entire seven figure agency like blueprint with all the trainings that we've ever put together on how to land clients, how to deliver world class results, how to retain those clients long term, and then how to scale, like how to scale the systems, the procedure, and the team so you don't have to do it all yourself. So you get access to all of that. Then you're going to get paired with a success coach that meets with you on a quarterly basis to say, like, here's where you're at right now. Let's build a plan for the next 90 days that we can hold you accountable to. So you got someone to pulse again. You're going to get access to a community, like Josh said, of about 350 other agencies on Facebook where you can share wins, you can share struggles, you can get feedback, you can ask a question and get massive feedback and great responses. And then we're going to get together 3 times per year in Miami. We get together for 2 days, 3 times per year. Great information, great insights, great networking, great progress and momentum celebration. In addition to access to guys like Josh, who are on pretty much every Wednesday to help you with your sales coaching. And we've got equivalent specialty coaches in each of the areas, whether it's, I don't know how to get appointments, or I don't know how to, actually do the SEO work that I need for my clients, or, hey, I'm trying to build the team and I need to put EOS in place. We've got specialty coaches that you can meet with to get answers, to get support, and to get guidance.
So I'll add that two things that the Facebook community is so, I would think, how I'm trying to say is it's almost undervalued, meaning on a regular basis, I am reminding my team that's stuck on a problem. Just tap into, I guarantee you, if you go to the Facebook group, whether that be the A players or, the Titan level, just ask there. And 95% of the time, we get an answer within hours of someone who's ran into the same problem and already resolved it. And that is just so invaluable. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's unvaluable. And the other thing is that I don't think you mentioned is the A players, and what does that mean and what do they get from this? So it's not just agency owners. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. As you grow and scale the agency, the goal is that you make more money, have more freedom, have a bigger impact, right? And so if you're going to have more freedom, you're going to have to put a team in place. So eventually, you're not going to be doing the things. There's going to be team members. There's going to be account managers. There's going to be salespeople. There's going to be operation specific people. And most agencies don't have a place for those team members to plug in, to mastermind, to sharpen their saw. And so that our whole A players community is a place for them to mastermind and to get best practices that they can bring back to your agency and help implement to move you forward faster.
So can you cite some recent examples of owners, agency owners who have really leveled up their sales process through the program, and like success story?
Oh
Just
man,
one, two.
That's one of my favorite things is to really look closely at the members and track their progress, right? And you guys know our mission as an organization is to help 500 agencies go to seven figures and multiple seven figures over the next 5 years. We now have 158 agencies that are over that seven-figure level. A specific example of a member that dialed in their sales process is Chris Hunter. Right, he works directly with roofing companies, and he was struggling. He was down at like that $30,000 a month level. He was getting appointments because he positioned himself, he published his book, but he just wasn't converting. And he jumped on one of the weekly calls because every Wednesday we've got a weekly coaching for sales. It's called a breakthrough session on any area. But his thing was, I need help with sales. And he was fortunate enough to connect with Josh Konigsberg. And Josh looked at his sales process, gave him some very specific tweaks on kind of some changes he could make to move things forward. And he just had a massive breakthrough. It went from 30K to 60K. And last I checked, he's just shy of the seven-figure level, about 70K in monthly recurring revenue. And that's all thanks to
He's got a couple weeks. He's got a couple weeks before the next intensive. Who knows? He could be walking that stage.
that's right. Good was one of the Josh level deals, and he's there.
Yeah, I remember doing a breakout session or two, basically tearing this stuff apart and rebuilding it for him. So with him, I should say. So, all right. So, um, how does the training not just for founders, but with the sales teams? Because I'm seeing more and more of that on my coaching calls.
Yeah. So we really encourage the agencies once they get to the place where there's enough deal flow, right? There's enough inbound opportunities that they put a salesperson in place. Right? And there is some great training in the portal. Like, here's the sales process we use. Here's how we ask for business. Here's recordings of those sales conversations. But we're really encouraging the agency owners, like, put your sales team on the Wednesday breakout, right? Let them be on those calls with Josh. We also have a Monday sales specific training. So we know one of the critical factors in growing your agency is the ability to land clients and get the yeses. And so there's lots of additional support, not just for the owner of the agency, but for those sales performers as they grow.
So our audience, Josh, probably has people at a bunch of different stages in terms of growing their agency, right? We've got folks that are doing multiple seven figures, that have sales teams, sales processes already well defined, but we also have people on the other end of that pendulum, right? Folks that have an agency that might be doing 10K a month in revenue, and they're the person that's doing the sales themselves, right? What do you think that owner operator of the agency that's wearing all those hats, specifically when it comes to sales, what can they do to speed up the process of growth?
I think you gotta focus on it, right? Like you gotta recognize to, if you're in the agency business, whether you're at 10K or 50K, you have to be the revenue driver in the business. And so as quickly as possible, you need to remove yourself from operations. Like, if you're building websites, if you're doing SEO, if you're doing the physical labor, you don't have a business, you have a job, right? And so you need to shift out of that and figure out how you can focus all your attention on sales and business development. And that should be twofold, right? Part of it is taking sales calls and asking for the business, but also figuring out how to build your sales engine so that you've got appointment flow coming in by building your authority, by getting clients to come to you pre-positioned to buy. If you can just focus on the marketing and sales side of the business, that's where you should see accelerated growth, assuming you've got the right people involved in your operations.
Do you think there's I know it's going to be really different depending on the agency and whatnot, but do you think that there's a specific time an owner should look at hiring that first salesperson? Is there a magic revenue number? Is there a total number of clients? Or is it just it's time when it's time?
I think it's going to be different for different people because most agency owners are naturally gifted in sales, right? They weren't successful if they weren't naturally gifted in sales. And so usually that's one of the things you hold on to the longest. I think there are occasions where, the agency owner is just more talented on the operational side of the equation. And you might want to partner with somebody that's got sale ability, or maybe you want to hire someone to come into the sales a little bit earlier. But I think that, the typical path is going to be right when you get to that seven-figure-ish level is when, you've got enough revenue coming in and ideally enough deal flow. You got your inbound engine purring where you've got 15 or 20 strategy sessions happening on your calendar every single month. And it's just a matter of saying, hey, I'm going to take someone, I'm going to place them in the sales process so they can take those sales conversations so that I can take a step back and focus on the big picture in the organization.
Can you talk a little bit about before you make that sales hire, like what you need to do and put in place in process in a sales process, have everything documented so that you don't hire somebody and they're sitting there floundering for the first 90 days trying to get an understanding of what they should be doing to convert prospects into clients.
Yeah, I think first of all, you got to recognize what you're trying to hire for in the sales process, right? Typically, unfortunately, a lot of agencies don't have deal flow coming in, and so they think I'm going to hire a salesperson, and they're going to tap to their network or they're going to make cold calls and they're going to set appointments. That's a completely different thing than we're talking about here, right? What you want to make sure you have in place before you get that salesperson, ideally, is some type of appointment proven process, whether it's you're doing webinars every month or you're running Facebook ads or you've got some type of joint venture relationship in place where you're consistently getting pre-scheduled appointments to the tune of 15 to 30 strategy sessions per month. When you're at that number, you can productively put somebody in place because that's going to be their only focus, right? Having those sales conversations, converting those opportunities, following up with the deals that didn't convert. I find the biggest issue with agencies where they just try and hire an appointment setter before the deal flow exists. So making sure you're actually ready for it. An amazing example of this is Chris Rodriguez. And I've had the opportunity to work with her closely over the last 5 or so years. And she works with martial arts studios, as you guys know, mainly on the Facebook ad side of the equation. Grew to 30K, continued to position herself as the go-to expert in that space, speaking, publishing her book, putting out great content. And she got to like $84,000 a month in recurring revenue. And, she did not want to let go of sales because she's like, I'm the face of this business. And if you've talked with her, like, she's very compelling. She'd be very hard to say no to. And I was like, look, you're doing 20 or 30 strategy sessions every month. That's not the highest and best use of your time. And she's a very good coachable person. She was like, okay, I'll do it. Right. And she went out, she hired a salesperson. Believe it or not, it was a beekeeper that didn't have a ton of sales experience, but that she was able to train on her sales process, that was able to like just step in and take it. Um, she, within the matter of like 12 months, had added additional $1 million in revenue because she was able to not be on sales calls all day. And that person was actually able to close about as well as she did. And she was able to explode the deal flow from there forward. So it can be done, right? And don't hold on to it just because you think that's your value in the business.
I feel like you ever show up to church and you feel like the pastor is talking directly, speaks directly to you. Kind of getting that feeling right now, fellas. Uh,
I've been telling you.
okay. I guess one more thing in terms of sales advice for agency owners. Is there any specific things that you started doing when you were on the phones or on the Zoom meetings closing business that really helped you, not just to close deals, but close them at the higher end packages, right? The higher end programs that meant more value that you could deliver to the customer and also more revenue for the agency.
Yeah, there's lots of little things that we adjusted. I'd say one like really important change in the way I approach sales. I read the book called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini and the psychology of persuasion. I'm sure you guys are you familiar with that?
Or
Robert
not?
Cialdini.
I'm
Anyway,
not.
a really good book. I highly recommend you read it. But in that book, he does a lot of research about, persuasion and he talks about positioning and all that fun stuff. But one of the key things he talks about is price anchoring. And the idea that if you lead with a higher price, let's say and like at that moment in time, we were charging $1,500 a month. That was our monthly fee. Right? It was like that was what we charged. It was all like website SEO, the whole 9 yards. And I had a very hard time convincing myself that we should charge more than that. But in the book, he's like, hey, look, if if you don't offer them a higher price thing, there's no way they can buy it, right? And if you want to sell a $3,000 thing, you'd be much better served to like lead with a $10,000 program and then drop to the five, and then your 1,500 becomes like it becomes so basic. It's like no one's not going to say yes, even to your lowest price thing. And so we shifted from just $15 a month. I think we moved it to 5K for our premium program, 3 grand for our mid tier, and then 2 grand. So even our cheapest thing became more expensive than what we were selling before. And what we started to see was because we were leading with, hey, look, based on what you told me, I think you need this, right? We're going to do the website, the SEO, the paid search marketing automation, 5 grand a month plus ad spend. A lot of clients just said yes to the 5K a month. I always think it was more like out of all the deals we were closing, almost like 30% were converting at that higher price point. And then almost everybody after that was buying the $3,000 a month program, right? So automatically, just by having price inquiry to a higher priced option and only showing the lower price thing once they said no, increased our average value per client and actually improved our our closing ratios.
Oh, your bottom line.
Yeah,
Might have to implement something like
dramatically improve the bottom line.
Right. And Clinton, I'll happily help walk through that with you if you want. As you know, that's exactly how I do it, Josh. So without having read the book. So
It's actually one of our quarterly rocks for my agency was to increase our average monthly recurring revenue for a client. It's just something that, going from being a PPC only agency to now a full service agency, I squirm every time we talk about increasing our prices, right? I just think, okay, this is going to be harder to sell. We're going to lose out on opportunities. And that's never the case, right? We increased our pricing probably 3 times in the last 24 months, and it really hasn't impacted our close ratio, but it certainly has helped the bottom line in terms of the agency. So
no doubt. So it's all about the value proposition. So I'd like to move on to my favorite part of the podcast. We call this the lightning round, Josh, where we get to ask you some lightning round real quick and just whatever comes to mind. So just got 5 quick questions for you. What's the biggest sales win that you've ever had and what made it happen?
Biggest sales win, I was thinking, is hiring a salesperson, right? I mean, I probably have sold hundreds of clients into our agency service, but the ones that happen without me having to be on the call, are exponential wins. So I consider that my biggest sales win.
Love it. Love it. So what's a mistake that turned into a great lesson for you?
Um, Geez, a mistake that turned into like so many mistakes over the years.
So many mistakes. I was doing 7 million a year has too many mistakes to remember. Right.
Um, yeah, I think, one mistake that I made often was I would come into sales calls and I would try and give them all the technical details, right? Like, exactly what their click-through rate, exactly what their ranking was. And that's a mistake that cost us a lot of opportunities. And when I realized people buy based on emotion, but they justify based on logic, I was able to say, hey, I really need to spend more time on this sales call talking about their goal and what they're trying to accomplish, how life's going to be better once they get there. I need to spend more talking about the problem and what it's costing them and how much pain there is in the fact that they don't come up or that they aren't getting the results that they need. I think that was a mistake that I had to learn. But once I figured that out, it made a big difference on our growth.
Simon Sinek, right? How great it is to inspire action, right? The golden circle, he calls it. So, and that's anybody who's not watched that. It's the number one, I think the number one TED talk of all time. So,
Mm.
favorite sales book or resource?
My favorite sales book is The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Love it. It's not just a sales book, but it's really a whole methodology and approach. Massive fan of that book, even though it's, you know, out of print now, I think, and Chet unfortunately has passed on. It's still in my mind one of the best sales resources out there.
I reference it on every strategy session.
Mm.
Um, most important trait for a great closer.
Mm. I think the most important trait is empathy and confidence. So the empathy to meet the client where they're at and to spend the time to understand what their goals are, what they're looking to accomplish, and really connect with the pain or the goal. But then the confidence to ask for the business, to command the premium. I think that's two traits, but I think those are two super important traits.
So well said. So well said. Okay, last question is any final advice that you have for agency owners trying to close more high ticket clients?
Mm. My main advice would be position yourself as an expert, right? Be somebody that deserves to command a premium. Either that's like because you've published the books and you've got the case studies, or because you've got the language patterns and you can have the right types of conversations. Invest in your positioning and your status.
Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. I remember coming to you a few intensives ago and mentioning that I had this idea of starting this podcast. So it's great that it's all come full circle and you're now a guest on it. One of the things that you always emphasize at the intensives is that you are the sum of the group that you so surround yourself with. I don't know what the exact phrase is there, but I want to thank you because since joining Seven Figure Agency, it has really surrounded me with a bunch of really like-minded, just strong individuals like Josh K, who won't boost his ego anymore. But for anybody listening that is not familiar with Seven Figure Agency, tell them where they can get some more information about the program.
Yeah, sevenfigureagency.com would be a great place to start, or you can grab my book on Amazon, The Seven Figure Agency Roadmap. You become an average of the 12 people you hang around with most. And so if you think about who that peer group is today, they're either leveling you up or they're keeping you stuck. Look very closely at what that peer group is, and that will dictate where you're going to be 12 to 24 months from now.
Well, I appreciate you helping me level up my peer group. So thank you very much for that. Tell the audience where they can follow you on social media.
At Josh Nelson Coach, or you can hit me up on Facebook, Josh Nelson.
Josh also has a very successful podcast, Seven Figure Agency. So where are you on all of the YouTube and Spotify and Apple?
YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and I kind of share some of our best ideas and strategies, as well as interviews with highly successful agencies like Josh Konigsberg. And I think we got to have you on the podcast. I don't think we've had you yet.
I don't think you had me either. So we'll talk about that. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for sticking around. I hope you got some great value out of today. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you follow the Closing Code on Facebook. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. Make sure you like us and subscribe on YouTube. And if you really, really like us, go ahead and leave us one of those 5-star reviews. It allows us to reach more people there. So, Josh, thank you again for giving us so much time today. Got a lot of value out of this. I hope our audience did as well. So.
Yep. Sentiments exactly. Thanks again, Josh. It's always a pleasure to see you. Look forward to seeing you at the next intensive. Everybody listening should reach out and check out sevenfigureagency.com and check out the podcast and all the other social media assets. It's been tremendous, life-changing process for me. So
100%.
thank you so much, Josh.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to the podcast for more straight shooting advice on closing deals that matter. Unlock the code, close the deal, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Closing Code Podcast.